Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about arrays. Arrays are a very useful data structure that allow you to store multiple values of the same type into a single variable. And we're looking at we're actually creating a new array object here. So we use the new keyword. So new integer array, and we're saying there are going to be 5 values in our array. And here we are saving that to an array named array. We call the square brackets here an array access operator. So this is the array access operator. And the 5 is the number of values within the operator. So here we're actually creating an array. Now, if we do not set values, if you notice, we're saying we have 5 values, but we're not saying what the values are. So the values would be set to default automatically. So for a numeric array, the default values would be 0. Now for a string array, the default values would be null. And for a Boolean array, the default values would be false. Now another way to create an array would be to actually to identify the actual values that we're going to be using. So let's try that. So here we're creating an integer myArray with 5 values. This is actually index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4. This part, I'm going to delete this. Okay, this part here is called the initializer block. These curly brackets are what are holding the value set. And this is actually the name of our array. And this is saying this is an integer array. Now, arrays are 0 indexed, as you've noted. So the first index will be 0. So we have index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now notice if we referred to index 5 here, what would happen? We would get an exception. It's called an array index out of bounds exception. So we cannot reference a place where there's no value. So we cannot reference index 5. We also cannot reference index -1. So negative numbers will throw an array index out of bounds exception. So let's try something. Let's actually try printing out these values. So we are going to reference, now this is a common error that I wanted to show you. What happens if we start with the reference for 1? So we're saying we want to start at index 1. Where is index 1? So let's try that out. So notice that we are printing out 25, 35, 45, and 55. So our indexes go from 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're saying in our test here, we're saying we only want to use the indexes less than myArray length, which is 5. So it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we started with 1, we've actually left out index 0. So this is a common error. Make sure because arrays are 0 indexed, we need to start with 0. So that's the first error I want to talk about. Now another error that's common is if we say we used an index that was negative. So say we said we wanted to start at -1. What's going to happen? So let's try that out. So it's thrown an array index out of bounds exception error. So it's actually telling us that -1 is out of bounds for the index. So that's not allowed. Now let's try something else. How about if, say, we're writing the code, we're making our print loop here. We start at 0, which is correct, but instead of using a test of less than, we use a test of less than or equal. What's going to happen? So let's try this out. So it's printed out 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. So it's printed out all of the values, but then it's thrown an exception. Because it's looking at index 5, it's not seeing a value. So we cannot reference values that do not exist. So that's why it's throwing that exception. So now when we correct the code and we use the less than test, and we're starting at 0, and we're running this, and let's see what happens. Now it runs perfectly. It's actually pulling out the values from index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4. So all 5 values. Excellent. Thank you for listening. Bye.